We in the devil's house, a lion's den, pit full of snakes, trapped in no whirlwind. And as me world spin in hell's kitchen with hell's angels, facing constant danger. Africa, the land where they say life first began. Everyone heard of the theory that Africans left Africa and migrated across the world. And in the process, they met Neanderthal and other human species that produced modern man. But when you look at charts, they say modern Homo sapiens is what mixed with Neanderthals, Denisovians, and with other life forces. The question is, who are these modern Africans? This chart showed that the modern Africans are the sand people of Africa. The sand people of Africa, or aka the Bushmen, is who they say are the ones that people originate from. Because the problem with the Outer Africa theory is there are larger genetic differences within Africans than between Africans and Europeans. African genetics are so different that you cannot just say Africans or Africa is where life started from. Because if life started from Africa, we have to ask this one important question. Since the Africans differ from one another slightly more than from Eurasians, and the genetic diversity in Eurasians is largely a subset of that in Africans, supporting the out-of-African model of human evolution, clearly one must specify the geographic origins of the individual sample when studying, or basically saying, which Africans left the continent? Since Africans are so diverse, the theory does not say which tribe of Africans left the continent and mixed with Neanderthals. Can we really support this theory and say that this is facts and a true human origin? Or is it another story? I would say it's another story. I ask a question. Would you believe someone who takes all of ancient history and stored in secret places where the public cannot see it and they don't share with the public? How can you believe these people and the ones who work with them? Or should we go back and look at the ancient stories of what the people written on the walls, on stone tablets? What did they say humans come from? Let's take a deeper dive.
Let's now bring ourselves back to the story, sometime around 200,000 to 300,000 years ago, when Enki created humanity. If you are knowledgeable of Greek mythology, this part of the story sounds very familiar to Prometheus, the ancient titan who created humanity out of clay. Like Prometheus, Enki stands up for the human race when in conflict with the gods, most of all, Enlil. From a more scientific perspective, the tablets seem to depict Enki as a geneticist who used some form of advanced technology to clone and create this new kind of human. There's even tablet images that depict a pattern that looks an awful lot like a DNA strand. Despite Enki's work, Enlil was still in charge of the operation and would command Enki to modify the genome as he required. Sitchin explains that the combination of earthly clay mixed with divine blood to create the prototype of man is firmly established by the Mesopotamian texts.
So we're going to follow the Sumerian text and the creation story instead of the Outer Africa theory. Because it's just a theory. Theories are not facts. It's just someone's idea of what happened. So these Sumerian gods, Annunaki, they were supposed to have been from heaven or came from space. And they was here in the flesh. And when we look at some of the pictures on the wall, Sumerian art, we can see pictures of how some of these ancient gods look. Thick beards, long hair, long wavy hair, bushy hair. If these people was here, where did they go? You see some pictures showing the tree of life, which is the creation story, just like the video was expressing from the Sumerian text. But if these are the gods, and they used the gods' DNA and mixed it with other life forms that was here on Earth, or whatever they did, to create what we call now modern day humans, what happened to the gods? Did they leave? Did they fall asleep? What happened? Me, after taking a close look, I'm looking and seeing similarities with the children of Israel. The children of Israel, God's chosen seed. And it makes more sense. Let's take a closer look. If you look at the hair is wavy at the top and have coils at the bottom. What people on earth have hair like this to date? If we can discover the people with this type of hair, we can discover who the ancient Anunnaki/Sumerian gods are. And then when we look at it, we see that so-called Negroes, African Americans, the black people, the black sheep of the world, the one who everyone like to hate, love and hate at the same time. They have the same hair as the ancient Anunnakis. Let's compare and take a moment to take this deep look and dive into the truth. Could this be the reason why so-called black people in America are called African Americans, Negroes, coloreds, and whatever other labels they are given? Is that why they can be considered the lost children of Israel, because they lost their identity and lost their true essence of who they are? Because when you look around the world, everyone else is not called by a color or are called by two continents. They call so-called black people of America Africans, which is a continent, and Americans, which is a continent. But they never specifically say what part of Africa they're from or what part of America they're from. It is North America and South America. So when you call them African Americans, which part of America are they from? When you call them Africans, what part of Africa are they from? Why is it when it comes to a so-called white person, you can call them a European and they can be like, I'm Scottish, I'm English, I'm Dutch. When it comes to an Asian person, they can be like, I'm Japanese, I'm Chinese, I'm Korean. When it comes to the real Indians from India, they can let you know what their nationality is. They are called by their name, their land. Why is it the identity of so-called black folks in America hidden? Could this story have some truth that maybe they are the gods who have fallen asleep, children of the gods? And something happened back then where they created a big sin, creating beings that shouldn't be here for their own selfish purpose. And now they're suffering from it because what goes around comes around, right? Or maybe it wasn't in the divine plan. As far as like they said in the Bible, when the fallen angels came down and had sex with the daughters of man and produced giants, beings that wasn't supposed to be here, that wasn't in the heavenly plan. What is really going on? Let's continue and take a deeper look.
The Sumerian texts also speak of attempts to craft a perfect primitive worker, which along the way resulted in deformed humans created by Enki and the mother goddess Ninhursag, which you might remember from her other name in the Babylonian story, Damkina. Essentially, in an attempt to perfectly match the genome of their human prototypes with the Anunnaki, there were some mistakes that were made along the way through a process of trial and error. Ninhursag also has another name called Ninmah, and in one particular ancient story called Enki and Ninmah, describes a bunch of awkward failures. In the story, Ninmah produces a man who could not bend his outstretched weak hands, one who could not close his eyes, one with both feet broken, one who was just an idiot, a man who could not hold back his urine, a woman who could not bear children, and a being who had no sex organs at all. With each new failed attempt at a proper functioning human, Enki finds a place for them in society, often as servants for the king. Sitchin theorized that the story recalls the first phase of the existence of the hybrid man, a being in likeness and image of the gods, but incomplete in some ways, including sexually, lacking in quote-unquote knowing. However, they were still useful to the Anunnaki's plan as servants in some way, shape, and form. According to this theory, for many thousands of years, Enki continually cloned and created new proto-humans who would grow up to become miners. However, these beings were sterile. They could not reproduce. During the period in which they grew into adults, these first humans were placed in an area where they could be contained and not leave. Sitchin believed that it was only when they grew up enough to be useful to the Anunnaki that they were transported to the mining area in Africa. I will also fully acknowledge that there's some discrepancy in this idea though, because the story of Enki and Ninmah specifically says Ninmah took clay from the top of the Apsu in her hand, and she fashioned from it first a man who could not bend his outstretched weak hands. The use of the location Abzu here, though, suggests that the creation of humanity actually took place in Africa, which also aligns better with the mitochondrial Eve discovery that we looked at earlier. Perhaps then it's just the other way around, and that after fashioning these servants, they were found useful to the Anunnaki in other ways than mining, and were transported to Mesopotamia to help work in and maintain Eridu or other locations nearby. Either way, it's believed that the location where these slaves worked in Mesopotamia was a place called Eden, which is the root word for the biblical Garden of Eden. There's a few ideas about this translation though. Today, most modern scholars translate the Sumerian term Eden as steppe or plain, suggesting it refers to a large field, I guess. Sitchin, on the other hand, translated Eden to mean home or abode of the righteous ones. At any rate, it's what happened in this location where things get intense. A dispute was growing betwixt the gods. You see, Enlil is often described as the oppressor of humanity, a bit of a patriarchal overlord who commanded the slaves. Enlil is said not to really care about humanity though. He just wants to mine gold, destroy humanity, and go home. The tablets even say that he orchestrates a massive flood to wipe out humanity, a subject that we'll get to shortly. Enki, on the other hand, is described as humanity's champion. Enki cares about humanity and sees them a bit like his children, and while they've been producing all of these sterile slave humans to mine gold and till the fields and all that stuff, in secret, he has been continually refining and developing the human genome to produce the perfect human, one who is capable of reproduction and living as its own sovereign species. This story says that Enki finally discovers the perfect genetic pairing and that a real human is achieved.
After listening to the story, could this be the reason why they have so many humanoids findings but don't have large populations of them? Because a lot of them was sterile, couldn't reproduce, or was just creations that was mistakes. Just like the video said, if we take the Sumerian text as truth, I think it makes a lot of sense why you have a lot of different humanoids that doesn't have a large population, because they was the results of the lab rats, or whatever you want to call it, gone wrong. Also, after they made the man, or the human, shall I say, is this where we get the Tel Asmar, if I'm pronouncing that correctly? When you look at these statues in ancient Sumerian, they're not the ancient Sumerians or what you consider the gods of Sumer or the Anunnaki. These are different beings, different phenotypes. When you look at their phenotypes, they look more like what you would call a European or Arab, something like that. And when you see the description, they say a Sumerian male worshiper. All these statues are worshipers of their creator. Could it be that these are the beings that the video is talking about and they considered that their creators were the gods, the ancient Sumerians, and they worshiped them? Questions. But it still doesn't answer one question. Why are the Africans so diversified with their genetics? Just like it was stated earlier, Africans are so diversified, they have Europeans are closely related to certain Africans than Africans are related to certain Africans, meaning their genetics are just so far apart from each other, they're not even cousins. We can say it like that, first cousins at least, right? So, it comes to the next question. What separates Africans from each other? Well, when I take a look at it, we can say they have Noah's children, Ham, Shem, Japheth. If those are Noah's children, all of them had to be one phenotype. What is it that they had in relation to each other? From my studies, what I see is when you go around the world and you look at all the great architects, all the great buildings, all the ones who did magnificent work that we can look behind and study, they all had long hair. Whether we go to Greece, we can look at them, long hair. We can go to Egypt, we can look at them, afros, long hair. Just like we look with the Sumerians, long hair. So could it be safe to say that those are the children of Noah, which we would still call the original gene? Well, what that makes the other melanated people around the earth. When I look around the earth, this is just my theory. It's not a fact. Y'all tell me what you think. But I look at the other melanated people, the ones who don't have long hair, don't have beards. They didn't build great architect. They still live in huts. They still hunter-gatherers still to date without being disturbed by any Europeans or having any European influence. Why isn't they haven't evolved? Is it that they are also a part of the splicing of creation of humans? Could they be the original humans and then later on so-called Caucasians came? Because if they are so diversified as far as the Africans, we have to answer this question. Where did these different Africans come from? Who are they? Who are we? Some of us have to be children of the gods, and some of us had to be the creation in the lab. Who's who? Tell me what you think.